Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about my week number 2 trade targets for fantasy football in 2021. Inside today's video, I'm going to be going over 5 players that I believe that you guys should be looking to trade for before the kickoff of week number 2 of the 2021 fantasy football season. But before we get on in to the breakdown of these players, I'd like to ask, if you are new to my channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, to please make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. Not only is it free, I put out content every single day to help you guys win your 2021 fantasy football championship. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure you hit that like button down below to help boost this video up the algorithm so that more beautiful people like yourself can see today's video. I'd also like to ask that if you guys have a Twitter and would like to follow me, please do so at NotoriousFNTSY. The link to my Twitter is also down below in the description. I always tweet about the fantasy football relevant news, so if you guys want to stay up to date with all things fantasy football, please follow me on there. Again, at NotoriousFNTSY. So without further ado, let's get into the video. My first trade target of week number 2 is running back of the New England Patriots, Damien Harris. In week number 1 up against the Miami Dolphins, Damien Harris toted the rock 23 times for 100 rushing yards, as well as tacking on 2 receptions on 3 targets for 17 receiving yards. The most promising thing I saw from this game about Damien Harris was not necessarily the fact that he rushed for 100 yards, because the Miami Dolphins don't have the greatest of run defenses. As a whole, they have one of the better defenses in the NFL, but up against the run, they're just not very good. So I expected Damien Harris to play relatively well. 100 yards, sure, that is relatively high, so great job to Damien Harris. But what was truly promising was the 3 targets and the 2 receptions for 17 receiving yards. Last season, in 2020, Damien Harris had 7 targets. Across the whole season, this man had 7 targets. On Sunday, he had 3 targets, which is almost half as many as he had on the whole season in 2020. Now, I don't expect Damien Harris to go out there in 2021 and get the receiving work of a guy like Austin Eckler, Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey, one of those running backs that gets so many points off of the receptions. That's just not going to happen with Damien Harris. Could it happen if James White was not on the team? Maybe. There is a good possibility that would happen, but with James White there, he's going to be sucking in enough targets to where Damien Harris isn't going to be able to see like 5, 6, 7 targets a game. But just the uptick of going from basically 0.3 targets a game to going to 1 or 2 targets a game is very, very big when it comes to fantasy football in a PPR or half PPR league. Another key factor of this game up against the Dolphins that I wanted to talk about was the fact that there doesn't seem to be any worry of a committee for the Patriots backs, at least in terms of rushing the ball, because Damien Harris had 23 of the 30 teams' rushing attempts went to Damien Harris, which is over 75% of the team's carries. So if you were worried about a potential committee, because that's normally what Bill Belichick does, sure, he'll let Damien Harris have the reins, but then Ramondre Stevenson could potentially step in and rush the ball like 10 times or something crazy, but that was not what happened in week number 1. So I believe going forward, while Damien Harris did end up fumbling in that game, that he is going to be the clear leading rusher on the team in terms of attempts. Now again, James White is still going to be in the game getting those receptions, but I don't think any of the other running backs really concern me here for the upside that Damien Harris presents. He acquired 11.7 PPR points in week number 1, 10.7 half PPR points, and 9.7 standard points, finishing on the week as running back number 27 in PPR, tied with Austin Eckler, running back 23 in half PPR, and running back number 21 in standard, tied with Chris Carson. So again, that wasn't the greatest week of Damien Harris's season. I don't believe that will be his ceiling. I think that he could do much better than that, especially when he is playing up against worse defenses in games where the Patriots are able to score a bunch of points, so they're able to run the ball later on in the game. If you looked at this Patriots team from 2021, just from the first game up against the Dolphins, it looks completely different to what we saw last year in 2020. In 2020, that defense was fucking terrible. That defense was bad because so many players opted out. Then in 2021, they get a bunch of players back and they bring in a bunch of new players in free agency. They get these guys back. They bring back Kyle Van Noy. The defense looks legit, and if the Patriots defense is able to hold these other offenses down that they're playing against, and Damien Harris is able to run the ball a lot more later on in the game because Mac Jones and friends are able to score more points, they're leading, so they want to run the ball out later on in the game, then Damien Harris has a very good chance to finish as a top 12 of running back in certain weeks where he has an elite matchup. So I think Damien Harris certainly worthy of trading for before week number 2 of the 2021 fantasy football season. Next up, we have Julio Jones, wide receiver of the Tennessee Titans. Now, the whole Tennessee Titans offense, aside from A.J. Brown, who ended up scoring a touchdown, was basically terrible for fantasy football in week 1. Ryan Tannehill got sacked 5 times by Chandler Jones. The offensive line just completely folded. The offensive line was terrible. Taylor Lewan got absolutely bulldozed by Chandler Jones. It was like the Tennessee Titans played the complete opposite of how I felt this game was going to go. I thought the Tennessee Titans don't have the greatest defense, but the offense will be able to push the tempo. This is going to be a high-scoring back-and-forth affair between Kyler Murray and Ryan Tannehill. They were going to go tit for tat. There's going to be a really high-scoring game, and at the end of the game, sure, it was really high-scoring, but that's because the Arizona Cardinals laid the absolute fucking smackdown onto the Tennessee Titans. In week number 1 in that game, Julio Jones had 3 receptions on 6 targets for 29 receiving yards, acquiring 5.9 PPR points, 4.4 half PPR points, and 2.9 standard points, finishing on the week as wide receiver 76, tied with Michael Pittman in PPR, wide receiver 77 and half PPR, tied with Michael Pittman Jr. and wide receiver number 77 in standard, tied with, you guessed it, Michael Pittman Jr. So Julio Jones had a bad game. Besides A.J. Brown, like I said, who scored that touchdown, Tannehill had a bad game, Henry had a bad game, as did Julio Jones. But don't panic. Do not fray. Do not fret. Do not run away after week number 1. If you have Julio Jones, you're going to keep Julio Jones. You want to know why? Because he's going to be just fine. But some people in your league who have Julio Jones, they might be nervous in your guys' leagues. They may be knees weak, arms are heavy, mom spaghetti, Eminem style. They may be super duper nervous because, oh man, Julio Jones, he's getting old. He's not on the Falcons anymore. Maybe he's not going to get that much usage in Tennessee. And then all of that narrative, all of that negativity that maybe they had going into the season, but they still selected him because he has that name factor of Julio Jones. Maybe that has all gone to their head, and they are very nervous about Julio. If you have Julio, do not be nervous. He's going to be perfectly fine. There's a reason why he's in the trade targets video, because I believe this whole Tennessee Titans team is going to turn things around on the season, and I would be shocked if Julio Jones finished outside of the top 24 at the wide receiver position. Now, after one bad game, it is still possible that he finishes inside the top 12, so don't be shocked if Julio Jones has a great season, because even in the game, while he wasn't getting peppered with targets, while this wasn't the best offensive showing, it was probably the worst offensive showing on this whole season. When we look back, we'll be like, wow, in week number 1, how were the Titans this bad? Because by week 17, they're going to be one of the better teams in the NFL. So don't fret. Do not worry about Julio Jones. He will be perfectly fine on the season. Next up, we have running back of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Najee Harris. Before we get on in to the breakdown as to why you want to trade for Najee Harris, please make sure if you are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying, to make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, as well as hitting that like button. So with Najee Harris in week number 1, he looked atrocious up against the Bills. This was his NFL debut, and it wasn't good. He had 16 rushes for 45 rushing yards, and he had 1 reception on 3 targets for 4 receiving yards. He had 5.9 PPR points, 5.4 half PPR points, and 4.9 standard points. Most people drafted Najee Harris in the first round or the early second round, and that's not what you're looking for when you draft a running back inside the first round. Finishing as running back 46 in PPR, tied with Zeke, running back 43 in half PPR, and running back number 42 in standard. So not very good at all. And Najee Harris had all of that rookie hype going his way, even up against the Bills, up against a tough defense. I expected Najee Harris to have a great game, but this was a sloppy game on both sides. Josh Allen didn't look all that great up against the Steelers defense. The Steelers offense didn't look all that great up against the Buffalo Bills, but I expect an immense bounce back for Najee Harris. The most promising thing about that game is that Najee Harris was the only running back on the Steelers to get a rushing attempt. He has a clear stranglehold over this Pittsburgh Steelers offense when it comes to touching the ball as the running back. So Najee Harris will be perfectly fine. Najee Harris is a workhorse running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Things will get better for Najee Harris. Now, I'm not going to include them in this video, but we will talk about them right now. Aaron Jones has a bad game up against the Saints. Unless you expect the Green Bay Packers franchise to just crumble, unless you expect Aaron Rodgers to just fucking retire at halftime of the next game like that Buffalo Bills defender did a couple of years ago, unless you expect that LaFleur just has no idea what he is doing, then this Packers offense will be much better in week number 2 and for the rest of the season. Another running back that was touted very highly and didn't play too well is the running back that tied with finishing on the week at the PPR points, Ezekiel Elliott with Najee Harris. Ezekiel Elliott has that tough matchup up against the Cowboys, and he doesn't play well, so people may be a little bit nervous. So Najee Harris, Aaron Jones, as well as Ezekiel Elliott, they're all in the same boat, in my opinion, of running backs that you drafted super highly that people may be nervous about that you want to go ahead and target. I didn't want to focus too much on Aaron Jones or Ezekiel Elliott. They seem like very obvious trade targets, as does Najee Harris, so we kind of just crumpled them all together into one discussion. Next up, we have a tight end, Kyle Pitts of the Atlanta Falcons. While throughout the offseason, I was worried about Kyle Pitts because a lot of people were touting Kyle Pitts to be a top 5 tight end in fantasy football because he is this freak athlete coming out of Florida, and I agree, he is a freak athlete. He is getting compared to Calvin Johnson for a reason because the guy is just a freak of nature. He's going to be amazing at the NFL level, but in the last decade, only one tight end has finished inside of the top 5 in the rookie season, and that was Evan Ingram. So I was telling everyone to, just pump the brakes a little, to just be a little bit cautious when you're drafting Kyle Pitts, not to completely fade him, but just to understand the risks that are there. The Atlanta Falcons offense crumbled, was absolutely atrocious up against the Philadelphia Eagles. And the Philadelphia Eagles aren't the best defense in the NFL. Maybe we did underrate them severely, but it seemed like the Atlanta Falcons offense just could not get it going. Early on in the game, the Falcons offense looked like this was going to be that shootout that I touted. Sure, they weren't playing amazing, but they were able to actually move the ball. But aside from the first couple of drives of the game, the Atlanta Falcons offense was limp dick. Couldn't do anything. In week 1, up against the Eagles, Kyle Pitts had 4 receptions on 8 targets for 31 receiving yards, acquiring 7.1 PPR points, 5.1 half PPR points, and 3.1 standard points, finishing on the week as tight end number 23 in PPR, 24.5 PPR, and tight end number 26 in standard, tied with Hunter Henry. And like I said, I had some thoughts about Kyle Pitts, about how he may not finish as a top 5 tight end in the offseason. I talked about it a bunch on my channel. But what I never talked about was Kyle Pitts being tight end 20, being tight end 25, anything like that. He should easily be able to finish inside of the top 8 at the tight end position. So right now is the perfect time to buy Kyle Pitts. The panic there is at its peak. Calvin Ridley didn't play well. Matt Ryan looked like dog shit. The offensive line got folded. Kyle Pitts doesn't put up these big numbers. This is an easy matchup. Everything's falling apart. The Falcons are going to be terrible. All these things are just circling through whoever has Kyle Pitts on their team's head. They are probably very, very nervous about what happens. They're thinking, holy shit, I messed up. Why didn't I draft Hockenson? Why did I draft Kyle Pitts? These are all thoughts racing through that person's head. So go ahead, send them the offer now, get Kyle Pitts on the cheap. And again, I still am not too sure that he will be a top 5 tight end in fantasy football, but he's certainly worthy of the price you're going to be able to pay for him right now. Final player up on the docket is running back of the Seattle Seahawks, Chris Carson. All off season, a lot of the narrative around Seattle, a lot of what Pete Carroll was saying was that this is going to be a run-heavy team, that they're going to commit to the run. And then in week number 1 up against the Colts, Russell Wilson just bent the defense over and was spanking them with some type of device, 50 Shades of Grey style, all right? Russell Wilson destroyed the Colts defense. And while I think Russell Wilson could do that all year, we did see Chris Carson, even in a game where they're passing so much, rush the ball 16 times for 91 yards, as well as getting 3 receptions on 3 targets, 3 for 3, for 62 yards with a fumble. He acquired 12.7 PPR points, 11.2 half PPR points, and 9.7 standard points, finishing on the week as running back number 20 in PPR, 21 half PPR, tied with Nyheim Hines, a running back number 21 in standard, tied with Damien Harris. So it appears that even if they're going to throw the ball at a much higher rate than I expected, that Chris Carson is going to be just fine. That in these big games where maybe they're throwing the ball more, Chris Carson is still going to be able to see some receptions out of the backfield. Chris Carson is the clear workhorse running back in Seattle. Rashad Penny gets banged up. Behind Rashad Penny, we got Wiki DJ Dallas. We have these other running backs, none of which concern me at all for the usage that Chris Carson, to kind of derail the usage that Chris Carson could have in this offense. I think the Seattle Seahawks are going to be a great offense. The defense looked much improved up against the Indianapolis Colts, which will lead to them running the ball later on in the game. I think that Chris Carson right now is going at the lowest price that you can get him all season, so go ahead and trade for Chris Carson right now before it's too late and he finishes potentially as a top 12 running back. So thank you guys all so much for watching this video. Let me know down below if you guys have any questions, maybe some other players you guys would like to trade for. Let me know down below in the comment section. I love you guys all so much. I hope you have a great rest of your guys' day. We'll be live tonight at around 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time before Thursday Night Football. I love you guys so much. Have a great rest of your guys' day. As always, goodbye.